Today we meet again to look at my book, Walking the Line, Embracing the Imperatives of Jesus. We're moving towards the end, and we're looking today at chapter 11, called Turning the World Upside Down, Moving from Pride to Humility. And the command or imperative that we're looking at particularly is Matthew 23. The unit is verses 1 to 12, but it ends, "The greatest among you will be your servant. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted." So, as we've been moving through the book, remember we go over the wall, initial commands from Christ, go a bit deeper down the wall, opening ourselves further up to what Christ wants for us, and then finally moving to maturity. We are trying to get at the very core principles of Christ's teaching. And I would say that this chapter actually is really pivotal in that Christ and the epistles also talk a lot about the importance of the attitude of humility, the attitude and practice of service. So when Jesus ends in this unit, all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. I mean, that is a premise that Jesus held on to dearly. And so we think, for example, of the Last Supper when Jesus is washing the feet of his disciples. That's an example of humility, of service, of having an attitude of giving to the other. And Jesus is saying that this is really a core principle of Christianity, a core principle of the ethics of the kingdom, the ethics of Christ. So with that in mind, let me read a little bit from this chapter. "The practice of service rather than the position of supremacy is the central motif of Jesus' instructions for the important role of helping others become fully human. The aspiration of being lauded by others is replaced with a realistic view of self, neither building oneself up or putting oneself down, but an honest self-appraisal not threatened by the success of others. In Jesus' paradigm for leadership, there is the corollary statement, all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. Humility becomes the underlying tone for the new way of doing things. Indeed, with Jesus, there is a complete reversal of the world's pattern for doing things. To the degree that subsequent listeners identified his disciples with the backhanded compliment, "These people are turning the world upside down." Acts 17, verse 6. So Jesus tells the story, the parable of the Pharisee who is praying and who is, exalting himself, who is telling God just how great of a person he is, and he's not engaged in all these various sin practices, and then he looks down the line at a publican or a tax collector who is praying, and he looks down and he says, "God, I am not like this person. I am above this person." He says, indeed, "I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector." Meanwhile, the tax collector is praying, and this person just simply says, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." And Jesus goes on to say that it is this tax collector who is looked upon favorably by God and not this Pharisee. So can we embrace an attitude of humility, not always engaging in comparison or competition with others, but just simply being who you are before God and attempting to make a difference in God's world by using your gifts, serving others, in an attitude of meekness, even as Jesus exemplified this attitude of meekness. We can think of Philippians chapter 2, 1-5, when Paul speaks of Christ. Be meek even as Jesus is meek. Imitate him. So I close with this statement, paragraph. The crux of the matter is that humility is the central ingredient for living an authentic life. It means that we are completely honest about who we are and what we have done. Humility doesn't play games. It is simple, even as its cognate humus refers to an ordinary lump of earth. A humble individually gladly prays, "This is who I am, Lord, with my faults in hand. Abba, I come to you openly and lean on your loving compassion. Lift me up and restore me to your ways of abundance and life." A lowly prayer is genuine. It reflects a teachable spirit that sees clearly the world, self, neighbor, and God. When we embrace humility, comparison and competition are not part of the equation. Rather, we engage the world and its inhabitants with loving compassion. I end with a statement from a friend of mine, as my Nigerian friend Olumuyiwa says, "There is enough room in the heavens for all birds to fly." I like that. And so, there's enough room for everyone. May we engage this core principle of humility, of patience, meekness, for the glory of God. Chapter 11 in Walking the Line. Thanks.